The desert air was sharp with the scent of sagebrush and dust, the kind of cold that seeped into bones. Marisol González tightened her grip around her children's shoulders, their small bodies trembling against her. 9-year-old Louis pressed his face into her side, his breath quick and shallow. 7-year-old Anna had stopped crying an hour ago, but her fingers still claw at Marisol's sleeve like a lifeline. Around them, shadows moved in the dark, other migrants, their faces hollowed by exhaust. The coyote, a wiry man with a scar across his chin, had ordered them to wait behind the scrub brush until he whistled. When you hear it, run. Don't stop. Don't look back. Marisol's throat burned. The last of their water was gone, and the memory of the boy who'd collapsed yesterday haunted her. The smugglers had left him behind without a second glance. Too slow, they'd mutter, as if he were a broken tool. She closed her eyes and thought of home. Not the cramped apartment in Juarez, its peeling walls, but the village she'd grown up in, where the mountains turned gold at sunset. Before the cartel started demanding protection payments. Before her brother's auto shop was torched for refusing. Before the police told him, you should have paid. A whistle shattered the silence. Marisol lunged forward, dragging Louis and Anna with her. The ground was uneven, rocks biting into her sandals as they sprinted toward the border fence. Someone ahead tripped a woman carrying a baby hen. A gasp rippled through the group. Then the lights hit them. White beams sliced through the darkness, followed by a voice barking in English, stop right there. Marisol didn't understand the words, but the meaning was clear. She shoved Louis toward a gap in the fence, Anna tucked under her arm. A hand grabbed her shoulder. Mom, Louis screamed. And then they were through. On the other side, the desert looked the same, but the air tasted different, like hope. Until the sirens started. The sirens grew louder, their wail slicing through the desert's silence like a blade. Marisol's pulse hammered in her ears as she yanked Anna and Louis behind a cluster of boulders. The boy was wheezing, his face streaked with dirt and tears. Anna had gone eerily quiet, her wide eyes fixed on the flashing red and blue lights in the distance. Stay down, Marisol hissed, pressing them both into the dirt. Boots crunched against gravel. Voices shouted in English, spread out. And the beam of a flashlight, skimmed over the rocks just above their heads. Louis whimpered and Marisol clamped a hand over his mouth. A memory flashed her brother, Raphael, being dragged from his shop by men in uniforms. No papers? They had laughed, shoving him into a van. That was the last time she saw him. The flashlight moved away. Marisol waited another agonizing minute before peering out. The Border Patrol agents were herding a group of migrants into a van. A young man struggled, and one of the agents slammed a baton into his ribs. The crack of bone made Anna flinch. We have to keep moving, Marisol whispered. 3 days later, the safe house stank of sweat and stale tortillas. A single bulb flickered overhead, casting shadows on the faces of the other migrants, a mix of exhaustion and wary hope. The coyote had dumped them here with a promise. Someone will come with work papers. Marisol didn't trust him, but she had no choice. A man in a grease-stained shirt arrived at dawn. Jobs in El Paso, he said. Cleaning, construction, pay is cash. Marisol stepped forward. I'll do anything. The man eyed her calloused hands. Ever worked in a kitchen? She nodded. Back in Juarez, she'd scrubbed dishes for 12 hours a day. Be at this address tomorrow. 6 a.m. Don't be late. The first day, the diner was called Sunrise Grill, its neon sign buzzing faintly in the morning haze. The manager, a thick-necked man named Carl, barely glanced at her fake social security card. You'll bust tables, mop floors, he said. No breaks unless I say so. By noon, her feet were numb. By closing, her back screamed. Carl counted out $40 in wrinkled bills. Half what the others get, he said. Take it or leave it. She took it. Weeks bled into months. Marisol's hands grew raw from scrubbing dishes in scalding water, her fingertips permanently wrinkled. The diner's kitchen was a sweltering box of grease and shouting Carl barking orders, the fry cook tossing curses in Spanish, the clatter of plates never ending. But the money, as meager as it was, kept Louis and Anna fed. They slept on a mattress in a one-room apartment above a laundromat, its walls thin enough to hear the neighbors fighting. Still, it was shelter. Then Hank Rourke walked in. He owned the diner, though he rarely showed his face. A thick-bodied man in his 50s, with a sunburned scalp and a gut that strained against his polo shirt. His eyes were small, darting, calculating. That day, he lingered by the dishwasher, watching Marisol work. You're fast, he said finally. Ever wait tables? Marisol wiped her hands on her apron. No, senor. Hey, call me Hank. He smiled, revealing a crooked front tooth. I'll train you. Tips'll double your pay. It was a lie. The first shift the customers leered. Men nudged each other when she bent to clear plates, their laughter sticky with implication. One slid a hand up her thigh as she refilled his coffee. When she jerked away, he smirked. Relax, sweet. Art, just being friendly. Hank watched from the register, said nothing. At closing, he handed her a wad of cash short by $20. You dropped an order, he said. Gotta cover the loss. Marisol's stomach nodded. I didn't, problem? His voice was quiet. She pocketed the money. The immigration van parked outside the diner twice that month. Random checks, Hank said, tapping a finger against her fake green card. Good thing I keep these on file, huh? Marisol understood. She worked harder. The winter rains came early that year, turning the streets outside the diner into shallow rivers of grime and gasoline. Marisol's shoes, cheap canvas sneakers from the thrift store, were permanently damp, the skin between her toes raw from blisters. But the cold was the least of her problems. Hank had started dropping by more often. He would appear at the diner during her shifts, leaning against the counter with a toothpick between his teeth, watching her with those pale, calculating eyes. At first, it was just comments. You look tired, Marisol. Long night, then accidental brushes against her hip as he squeezed past her in the narrow kitchen aisle. One evening, as she was counting her tips, always less than the other waitresses, always his shadow fell over her. You know, he said casually, I see he's been cracking down on this neighborhood. Raided the poultry plant down the road last week. He picked up a fork she just polished, inspected it, then set it down again. Real shame. Lot of families got split up. Marisol's hands stilled. He smiled. You're safe here, long as you're useful. The incident with the wallet 2 days later, a customer claimed his wallet was missing. It was right here. The man, red-faced, reeking of beer, shouted, slamming his palm on the table. That bitch took it. Marisol froze, tray still in hand. She'd only cleared his empty plates. Hank appeared instantly, oozing fake concern. Now, let's know. T jumped too. The man stood up, looming over Marisol. Check her pockets. Hands grabbed her. Someone yanked her apron. A $20 bill fluttered to the floor, her tip from another table. Well, Hank said, shaking his head. Marisol, I'm disappointed. The diner's patron stared. The cook looked away. She was sent home without pay that night. Consider it a lesson, Hank said. The ultimatum the next morning, he called her into the cramped office at the back of the diner. The walls were thin enough to hear the dishwasher running, the clatter of plates a steady percussion to Hank's quiet, deliberate words. I could call IC right now, he said, tapping his phone on the desk. One call, and you're back in Mexico by sundown. Marisol's mouth went dry. But I'm a fair man. He leaned back in his chair, the springs creaking under his weight. Work the night shifts. No complaints. And I'll forget about the wallet. Night shifts meant fewer customers, fewer tips. It also me. And he closing up alone with Hank. Marisol understood what he wasn't saying. Okay, she whispered. The night shifts were worse than she imagined. With the diner empty and the front door locked, Hank made sure the surveillance cameras were accidentally turned off. His hands always found an excuse to linger, adjusting her apron strap, brushing crumbs from her shoulder, his fingers digging just a little too hard into her skin. You're a good worker, Marisol, he'd murmur, his breath reeking of aubergine and cheap mints. Real loyal. That's rare these days. She learned to shrink away without making it obvious, to laugh nervously when his jokes slithered too close to indecent, to keep her eyes lowered when he stared at her for too long. But one night, he stopped pretending. The back room had happened after closing. Hank cornered her near the storage closet, his bulk blocking the only exit. You know, he said, voice low, I've been real patient with you. Marisol gripped the mop handle. Eat tighter. I need to finish mopping, senor. It can wait. He stepped closer. We got other business. When he grabbed her wrist, she reacted without thinking, shoving him back with all her strength. Hank staggered, his face twisting in surprise, then fury. You little bitch! The slap came fast, snapping her head to the side. Pain exploded across her cheek, hot and bright. You forget your place, he hissed. I own you. One call, and your kids are orphans. Marisol tasted blood. Home she didn't remember leaving the diner. The streets were slick with rain, the neon signs of the pawn shops and liquor stores reflecting in the puddles. Her face throbbed. Her hands shook. Louis and Anna were asleep when she crept into their tiny apartment. Anna had kicked off her blankets again, one small arm flung over her brother's shoulder. Marisol watched them breathe, her vision blurring. She couldn't stay. She couldn't leave. The plan the next morning, she dug out the business card she'd found months ago, tucked beneath a pile of receipts. Legal aid for immigrant workers, free and confidential. Her fingers trembled as she dialed. The legal aid office smelled like stale coffee and old paper. Marisol sat on the edge of a warm plastic chair, her hands clenched in her lap, her eyes darting to the door every time someone walked past. The bruise on her cheek had darkened to a sickly purple, hidden poorly under layers of concealer she'd bought at the dollar store. A woman in her 30s with sharp glasses and a no-nonsense ponytail opened the inner office door. Marisol González. Marisol stood so fast her knees cracked. I'm Rachel Carter, the woman said, extending a hand. Come on back. The office was small, cluttered with file boxes and a humming desktop computer. Rachel shut the door behind them and sat across from Marisol, her expression softening. Tell me what's going on. At first, the words wouldn't come. Marisol's throat tightened, her mind flashing to Hank's sneer, the way he'd said I own you. But then she thought of Anna's smile, Lewis's quiet bravery, and the dam broke. She told Rachel everything. The legal reality. Rachel listened without interrupting, her pen scratching notes on a yellow legal pad. When Marisol finished, Rachel set the pen down with a sigh. Here's the hard truth, she said. Without proof, it's your word against his. And given your immigration status, she didn't need to finish. Marisol's stomach dropped. So there's no thing I can do? I didn't say that. Rachel leaned forward. We can file for a U visa for victims of crimes, but we'll need evidence. Records of the abuse, witnesses. She hesitated. Would any of your coworkers speak up? Marisol thought of Carl, the cook who'd looked away when Hank slapped her, of the other waitresses, all avoiding her eyes since the stolen wallet incident. No, she whispered. Rachel's jaw tightened. Then we'll find another way. The trap set 2 days later. Marisol wore a wire. It was Rachel's idea, a tiny recorder tucked into her bra, invisible under her uniform. Get him to admit it, Rachel had said. Anything. A threat, a confession, just enough to prove he's coercing you. That night, as she wiped down the counter, Hank swaggered in late, smelling of whiskey. You're here late again, he said, sliding onto a stool. Almost like you want to be alone with me. Marisol forced her hands not to shake. I need this job, mister. He smirked. And maybe you should start showing some gratitude. His fingers brushed her hip. Unless you want me to call ICE about that fake green card. Her pulse roared in her ears. Please don't. That's what I thought. He leaned closer. Now get in the back. The back room of the diner was claustrophobic, lit by a single flickering bulb. Hank's bulk blocked the door, his shadow swallowing her whole. The wire pressed against Marisol's ribs like a second heartbeat. You've been real stubborn, Marisol, he said, loosening his belt with a slow, deliberate smirk. But tonight you're gonna learn. The door crashed open. Hank Rourke, step away from her. Rachel stood in the doorway, flanked by 2 cops. Hank whirled, his face purpling. The hell is this? She's my employee. We heard everything, one cop said, coldly tapping his ear. Live feed. Hank's eyes darted to Marisol. Realization dawned, then rage. You lying bitch. He lunged. A cop tackled him to the ground. The aftermath. The deed. In her clothes for renovations the next day, Marisol sat in Rachel's office, wrapped in a scratchy donated sweater, as the lawyer slid a paper across the desk. U visa application. You're officially a witness against him. Lewis and Anna played with Lego in the corner, oblivious. Will he go to jail? Marisol asked. Rachel hesitated. Probably not long, but he'll lose the diner. And you? She smiled. You get to stay. The courthouse steps were slick with morning rain as Marisol herded Lewis and Anna through the towering oak doors. The children's shoes squeaked against polished marble floors, their wide eyes reflecting the vaulted ceilings and stern-faced portraits of judges lining the walls. Marisol adjusted the collar of Lewis's stiff new shirt bought yesterday at Goodwill for $3.99 and smoothed Anna's braids. Remember, she whispered in Spanish before catching herself. English only now. Always English here. Stay quiet. Hold hands. Don't touch anything. The courtroom air hung thigh, CK with the scent of wood polish and stale coffee. They slid into the last row of benches, Marisol's fingers digging into the warm wood as Hank Rourke swaggered in with his lawyer. He'd gained weight since the arrest, his gut straining against a cheap suit, but the same cruel smirk twisted his lips when he spotted her. Anna whimpered and buried her face in Marisol's side. All rise for the Honorable Judge Cynthia Martinez. The judge's sharp eyes missed nothing the way Hank's lawyer patted his client's shoulder like calming a rabid dog, the tremor in Marisol's hands as she lifted a glass of water. Prosecution may proceed. The district attorney, a young black woman with box braids coiled at her crown, projected the evidence onto a screen, the audio recording Hank's whiskey-dick voice hissing about ICE, time-stamped security footage of him following Marisol into the stockroom. Dr. Nguyen's medical report, contusions consistent with blunt force trauma. Juror gasped when the prosecutor zoomed in on the photo of Marisol's bruised face. Hank's lawyer sprang up. Objection. This inflammatory. Overruled. Judge Martinez's voice could have cut steel. The jury will see the full context of the defendant's character. For 3 hours, witnesses unraveled Hank's empire of fear. Carl, the diner manager, shifted in his seat as he admitted Hank ordered him to keep the illegals in line. Maria, the former hostess, wept, describing how Hank accidentally brushed against her for years until she quit. Officer Delgado, read Hank's arrest record. 2 prior assault charges, both mysteriously dropped. Through it all, Marisol sat perfectly still, translating snippets for the children when their confused whispers grew too loud. Louis's small hand fisted in her skirt when Hank took the stand. "Just a misunderstanding," Hank drawled, mopping his forehead. "Marisol's a sweet girl, but she don't understand our jokes. Gets all emotional." His lawyer smirked. "The pros." Ecuter slid a final exhibit across the table, a handwritten ledger. "Your jokes seem expensive, Mr. Rugg. This shows you paid Carlos Mendez $200 weekly to recruit vulnerable workers. Would you call that humor too?" Hank's neck turned beef red. "Them's lies." The gavel cracked at 3:17 p.m. "Guilty on all counts." The sentence landed like a gut punch. 6 months probation, $5,000 fine. Marisol did the math, less than he earned in 3 weeks. 90 days suspended sentence, meaning no jail unless he reoffended as the bailiff let him out. Hank twisted in their grip to snarl at Marisol. "This ain't over, Puta." His breath reeked of bourbon and rage. "I know where your kids go to." Officer Delgado stepped between them. "That's enough, Rourke." Outside, Rachel pressed a business card into Marisol's palm. "Domestic violence hotline." "He'll be back," the lawyer murmured. "Change your locks. Here's my cell, call anytime." Rain misted Marisol's face as she knelt before Louis and Anna. "We won," she lied, forcing a smile. The children's hesitant grins shattered something in her chest. Across the street, Hank's silhouette filled the window of a parked Cadillac. Watching, waiting. The bus ride home stretched interminably. Anna slept against Marisol's shoulder while Louis traced the courthouse's address, $700 assistant, on his palm, memorizing it like she'd taught him to memorize emergency contacts. That night, Marisol stacked chairs against the apartment door and lay awake listening to every creak. The green card application on the kitchen table taunted her. Part C. List all instances of abuse. Her pen hovered. How to explain the 1,000 cuts of survival? The way Hank's jokes slithered under her skin? The terror when the phone rang? A sob clawed up her throat. Downstairs, a car engine growled to life. Tires screeched. Some victories tasted like ash. The weeks following the trial passed in a haze of sleepless nights and jumpy days. Every creak of the apartment stairs and Marisol's heart racing. She installed 3 new locks on the door, each bolt sliding into place with a heavy thunk that still didn't feel like enough. Louis had started wetting the bed again, something he hadn't done since they'd crossed the border. Anna refused to let go of Marisol's hand, even at school, her tiny fingers clutching like vines. "It's okay, Mommy," she'd whisper, though her wide eyes said otherwise. Marisol kept Rachel's business card tucked in her bra, the edges worn soft fro. Constant touching. The new job, the daycare center, smell of crayons and baby powder. "Your references were excellent," said Mrs. Alvarez, the director, adjusting her cat-eye glasses. "We need someone reliable in the toddler room." Marisol nodded eagerly, already calculating $12.50 an hour was more than Hank had ever paid. But when Mrs. Alvarez slid over the I-9 form, Marisol's stomach dropped. "I need to get my documents from home," she lied. Rachel had warned her the U visa would take months to process. Until then, she was still undocumented, still vulnerable. The phone call, it came at 2:17 a.m. "Marisol." Hank's voice was slurred, thick with alcohol. "Miss me?" She froze, the phone pressed to her ear, Louis and Anna sleeping beside her. "I know you got that daycare job," he continued. "Real shame if I see you did a surprise inspection, huh?" The line went dead. Marisol spent the rest of the night packing a duffel bag with essentials, passports, cash, the kid's birth certificate, just in case. The offer Rachel met her at a Denny's off the highway, the booth sticky with syrup. "We can get a restraining order," she said, stirring her coffee. But Marisol knew the but. Restraining orders were paper shields. Hank had friends in the department, the same cops who'd looked the other way for years. "There's another option," Rachel continued. "A women's shelter in Phoenix. New names. Fresh start." Marisol pictured Hank's Cadillac idling outside the daycare. Honest a sting smile. Louis's nightmares. "When do we leave?" The Greyhound bus smelled of disinfectant and old sandwiches. Marisol pressed her forehead against the cold window as the desert rushed by in a blur of scrub brush and fading highway lights. Louis slept with his head in her lap, his breathing uneven. Anna clutched the stuffed rabbit Rachel had bought her at the last gas station. For bravery, the lawyer had whispered. Day 1, the shelter director, a former gang victim with survivor tattooed across her knuckles, showed them to a bunk room. No men allowed past this door, not even cops. The other women eyed Marisol's bruises and said nothing. Day 14, Louis punched a boy who called Anna border trash. Marisol washed his bloody knuckles in the communal sink, her hands shaking. "We don't fight," she whispered. "We survive." Day 30, the UV's approval arrived. Rachel drove 6 hours to hand-deliver it. "This changes everything," she said. But Marisol noticed the way her eyes started to The shelter's security cameras. Day 67, a new job at a grocery store. The manager, a Honduran woman missing 2 fingers, didn't ask for papers. Just don't steal, she said, handing Marisol an apron. Day 109, Anna's teacher sent home a note. She is reading at a 3rd grade level. Marisol taped it to their bunk, next to Louis's crayon drawing of their old apartment, the one with Hank's shadow in the window. Day 182, the call came while Marisol was stalking cantaloupes. Rourke's dead, Rachel sighed. Wrapped his Cadillac around a pole. That night, Marisol burned the duffel bag of emergency supplies in the shelter's rusty barrel. The flames ate the last of Hank's hold on them. Day 365, they moved into a studio apartment with yellow curtains. At the lease signing, Marisol hesitated before printing her real name for the first time in years. Outside, Louis kicked a soccer ball with the shelter boys. Anna read aloud from a library book. Somewhere, a phone rang in an empty house. You've reached Hank Rourke, but the wind through their new screen door drowned it out.